Hang on, it's preparing the live stream. Still setting up. All right, we're live.
Hello.
All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this live stream. We are the South Carolina Education Association. I am Todd Scholl, Professional Practice and Policy Fellow, working with the NEA and the SCEA, and so proud to be a member of this union and a member of this association. And we are excited to have Cherolyn Allen with us tonight. And she's going to be talking with us about your rights as an educator. Cherolyn has been employed as an advocate with the SCEA since January 2019. She is the main contact person at the SCEA help desk, working alongside our sole attorney for the SCEA. She was previously employed as a hearing officer for 5 years, performing in a quasi-judicial role at the Office of Administrative Appeals office at the South Carolina Department of Social Services, or DSS. Previously with DSS, Ms. Allen has also prosecuted child and adult abuse and neglect cases for 10 years. She's also a former teacher and a current member of the Advisory Council for Educating Students with Disabilities. Welcome, Cherolyn, and welcome to everybody out on Facebook who is watching. This is such an important topic, and we're so excited to have your expertise in helping us, because a lot of times educators, we really don't know what our rights are. We think we know, we hear about it, but we don't know for sure what our rights are. And one of the great things about being a member of the SCEA is you've got someone like Cherolyn here who can really help advise you when you need to know what are my rights. And she's going to do a sort of a broad presentation on your rights tonight. So it's really going to be important for you to tune in and then share this information with your colleagues so that everybody's on the same page. I'm going to turn it over to you, Cherolyn.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Todd, for having me. And I've been looking forward to this. I just love working with our members, and it's just as special to me to present in this presentation tonight. So thank you for having me tonight. We're going to try to get through this without having my son come into the room with me rather, and try to interrupt. So we're going to go ahead and get started.
All right. I think I went to there we go. Now we're at the beginning. All right. We are at the beginning of your presentation. So
all right.
Ready to roll.
All right, you are in control of the click button. So you're going to take me to the next page or the next slide.
All right, okay. I'll be happy to do that. All right.
All right. Okay. All right, so we're going to begin with this disclaimer. And it's just, just a general disclaimer. This presentation and its content are intended for general information purposes only, and it does not create an attorney-client relationship. I am, as you just described, I am at the SCEA answering questions pretty much all day. So if anyone has any individual questions, you can contact me at the office, and at the end of this presentation, pretty much all day. So I'll actually have the telephone number to my office. You can also contact the regional UNISERV director. There are three different regions, and there is a UNISERV director that is assigned to each one. All right, so moving on to the next slide. All right, so I've been tasked with presenting on two federal laws tonight that we get a lot of calls about, and that is the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as FMLA. And that is the Family Medical Leave Act. I'm going to begin with the ADA, and we're going to try to go through it as quickly as we can with the half an hour that we have that is assigned for tonight. All right, the ADA was signed into law on July 26, 1990 by President George H.W. Bush. It was updated a number of times, particularly in 2010 and then in 2016. Basically, the ADA guarantees that people with disabilities have the same opportunities as everyone else. You feel free to enjoy equal employment opportunities. It is I say that the slide says that it's similar to the civil rights protection, and I would even branch out to say that is an extension of the civil rights protection, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And so it's, basically provides a lot of protection for people with disabilities. Okay, next slide. The ADA covered, what are the entities that are covered under the ADA? Employers with 15 or more employees, state and local governments, labor organizations such as the SCEA and the NEA. We're all covered under the ADA. And more particularly for the audience that we will have tonight, it would be for school districts, our teachers, our educators, our principals, cafeteria workers, bus drivers. They're all covered under the ADA. Next slide. Okay, all right. Who's protected individually? What is it? What are those different criteria that would qualify person for the protections under the ADA? Number one, you must have a disability. And what does that mean exactly? I speak with a lot of people, and there are people who call in about, having high blood pressure and diabetes. Okay, does that qualify a person as a person with a disability? And the answer is that it depends. It depends on how extensive your condition is, and what does it, what types of symptoms that you're having, and what your doctor has given you, what types of reports that your doctors has given you about your disability or your condition, I should say. It also covers a person who has a relationship with someone with a disability. The second prong of this of the criteria is physical or mental impairment. Physical, a lot of times people can, see when a person has a physical impairment, and sometimes you cannot see when you have a mental impairment. It covers, again, a wide area of conditions. A person with ADHD, for example, someone who has dyslexia, someone who is autistic. And it goes back to, what I mentioned earlier. It has to be something that is medically diagnosed or medically prescribed by a doctor. Number three, substantially limits one or more life activities. And then you get into a little slope here. What does that mean exactly? What are those limiting life activities? Driving, caring for oneself, sleeping, standing, breathing. Sorry about that. Okay, all right. Just different types of day-to-day activities that a person can do. So number four, whether or not you have a history or record of such an impairment, or a person who is perceived by others as having such an impairment. Before I move on, I get questions sometimes about, what about if I am applying for a job? I should not be discriminated against if I'm applying for a job. And that is true. If someone is asked, if you're on a job interview as a teacher or an educator, and you're asked if you have a disability, a lot of times, it's not so pronounced. Most people are informed enough that they're not going to ask a person right off the bat whether or not they have a disability. But those are, the little things that people can do during an interview to suggest that they are not going to hire you because of your disability. All right, moving on to the next slide. Major life activity, we already gone over that. Walking, caring for oneself, eating, sleeping, sitting, speaking, reading, all of the day-to-day activities that a person can't do. Those are the major life activities that could be affected if you have a physical or mental impairment. Next slide. You will see this slide a number of times throughout this presentation because it really comes down to what is the recommendation by your doctor, or the report, I should say, by a doctor, with all of these different issues or problems that you can face. It would be essential to have something from your doctor to explain what exactly is your disability. Do you have to provide your entire life history or your medical history? No, you do not. But you do have to provide enough information, sufficient information that it will allow for the school district to make a decision as to whether or not you're entitled to some type of accommodation. Next slide. Okay, accommodations, and I really should have added into this slide reasonable accommodations. What exactly does that mean? Next slide. Okay, the person who is in this picture it's obvious that there is a as I mentioned before, there is a disability, and the person is able to get a wheelchair, for example. And I'll go ahead and just read. A job accommodation is an adjustment to a job or work environment that makes it possible for an individual with a disability to perform their job. And that could be anything. It could be, as this person is in a wheelchair. Next slide. Okay. And it could be a device, acquiring or modifying equipment or devices, adjusting or modifying exams, training materials or policies, and providing qualified readers or interpreters. It's based on a case-by-case basis. You might need, for example, for modifying examinations. Okay, well, how does that apply to an educator? There are certain exams that you have to take as an educator. And so whether or not you might need to have an adjustment for that exam. Do you need a larger computer for eyesight? Do you need a standing computer? If you're not able to, to sit, you have back issues or some type of issue, whether or not there is some type of device or accommodation that is reasonable for a person to perform the essential functions of the job. Next slide. There are so many different questions that I get about reasonable accommodations. I would say that this is the most popular in terms of the calls that I get. And you might get questions about restructuring your teaching job. And what does that mean exactly? Okay, so do you have to get, could think of an example where someone might need to get some type of treatment for some type of illness that he or she is having. And does it mean that you would change your planning time from, say, earlier in the day to later in the afternoon, so that you're able to go to get this treatment, or vice versa? Change it to being in, actually probably would be better to have it later on in the day. Modifying your work schedules. And I would have to say, I just want to put a little caveat in here that it's usually really hard to change a teacher's schedule, because you have your students that come in at a certain time, and you have certain classes at a certain time. So it's really hard, but it's not impossible. And, it just takes an ask. You just have to make a request for the particular accommodation that you would like, and, and really see what happens. The last item on this list is reassignment for a different position. And I would say that this is usually the last straw when you have tried everything else and nothing else has worked, and so you ask to be reassigned to a different position. Maybe it's a job that would be closer to it would be closer to your home, so that you're able to go to get certain treatment at a particular hospital or a doctor's office. And and again, it's just a matter of requesting it. And I think that some educators are afraid to make those requests, but you should not be. If it's something that is protected by the law, which it is, go ahead and ask for it. Next slide. I think in the age of COVID, teaching from home is one of the most popular requests that's being asked by, or has been asked by, educators. Maybe not, recently, but I would say within the last year, it was requested a lot. And there are times that it has been provided or granted, and there are other times that it has not. It was granted a lot last year, obviously, because there was, it was a virtual, we were basically all virtual last year. And so, but this year it's a little bit different, and there are some mandates in place. There's we now have the vaccine. And so, the school districts are not as ready to have teachers work from home. And the other thing is that to be considered is that there needs to be some type of virtual program in place in order to afford that. And, and I say that because it's very important. I always am honest with members that a lot of times the districts, not a lot of times, they don't create new jobs. They don't create a job just to accommodate a teacher, and I should say just a teacher, but they don't create jobs just to accommodate someone. It usually should be something that is, already in place, a virtual program that's already in place. I have talked with many educators who have transitioned to, the virtual programs. There are a number of them here in South Carolina, and they have been able to do that successfully. And so, but, for the others that are not able to go to those programs, you can still ask. I could say that it's a lot harder, as I said before, to get that to be granted this year. Next slide. All right. Okay, so I have a warning. A qualified employee or applicant with a disability is an individual who, with or without reasonable accommodations, must be able to perform the essential functions of the job in question. And what does that mean exactly? When there is a request for a reasonable accommodation, you must be able to do the job. You must be able to teach. You must be able to, if you're a bookkeeper, be able to keep up with the bookkeeping. If you're a principal, you must be able to perform all the tasks of a principal. So those are the essential functions of the job. If you're not able to perform the essential functions of the job, then it would be considered to be an undue burden on the school district. What the marginal functions can be adjusted, and like we talked about before, or mentioned before, enhancing your performance. If you need a bigger print for your classroom, you need a bigger print for your computer. You need tools that's going to help you to just perform your teaching position or your teaching duties. So again, I want to highlight that you cannot basically say, okay, I'm not going to do my job. I'm not going to perform my job. what are the essential functions? And that's basically what is in your job description. If you're able to perform those duties in your job description, you're fine. You just need to get the enhancements to help you based on your disability, then you're in a good spot. All right, moving on. I have included the Job Accommodations Network because I just think that is just a great tool to, it's a tool of reference where if for someone who's trying to figure out what are those accommodations, I have a particular disability but I just don't know what those accommodations could be. If you are able to go to the Job Accommodations Network, which is a pretty simple site to get to, you can call them. I think on the telephone, you will have to leave a message and they'll give you a call back. I know that was the case last year. Or live chat, which I love. You can just go to askjan.org and you just have a chat with someone, and it's very fast and very easy to do that. And they basically, you ask as questions as you can, or you can send your request by fax. I refer the JAN network to a lot of our members. Next. Okay. All right. So how do you make a request for accommodations? And it's simple. You write a letter or an email to your ADA coordinator, and you always keep the principal in the loop. You don't leave your principal out. You should have already had a conversation about your principal about it. And then, you just go ahead and put it in writing, because you always want to document all of these things. So you go ahead and do that. And I have indicated that is an ADA coordinator. In different districts, there are different names for that person. It could be your civil rights coordinator or your 504 coordinator, or just different names for that person. There should be something in the district policy that will identify who that person will be. But you simply just write an email, a letter. If you call me, I love doing that. I love working with our members to write those emails and letters, basically asking those questions. And sometimes it's the way that you write a letter, the information that you place in there. Sometimes you might have to put a little bit of policy in there or a little bit of law into the email. So you can call me and I will walk you through it. Next. And again, there is that doctor's note. It's always getting the information from your doctor, because once you make that request for reasonable accommodation, the next question is going to be, how do you determine that you have a disability? And that's where you need to have something from your doctor that is well, prepared to explain, again, not your whole medical history, but just enough information to indicate that you do have a medical condition that you need some type of accommodation for. Next. All right, so then you have this guy sitting here at this red phone, because then you have the waiting period, and it could be just daunting waiting to get that response back, especially if you have a medical condition and you just need to have it taken care of, or some type of accommodation to help you do your job. And sometimes the districts drag their feet, and sometimes they're pretty quick. And so how long is too long? There is no right answer for that. But at one point, a member had called in and said that she had been waiting for 2 months. And I don't recall what exactly the reasonable accommodation was, but I would say that 2 months is a long time. There are people who have made requests and want to know within a day or two. Again, you can get a response back in a day or two, but it depends on the situation. It depends on what's going on. If the request is made around the holidays, like now, right before Christmas time, right before Thanksgiving, it's possible that you might not get a ready response right away. So again, it just depends on what's happening at the time. All right, next. All right, and so you've waited, and then you get a response, and you get a response that is positive that says, Mr. So-and-so, you're going to be allowed to have that reasonable accommodation that you requested. That is wonderful. I love to get responses back like that. But there are other times that you don't get that positive response that you wanted. And so what then? What do you do next? Okay, can I file a grievance? Yes, you can. You can actually go ahead and we can work on filing a grievance together, and then work on it and present it. And but the other option is maybe reporting it to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And you have 180 days after the denial to do that. And again, that is something that I can walk you through. Then you have the South Carolina, now the EEOC is the federal entity, and then you have the South Carolina Human Affairs Commission. And they're basically, they do the same thing. They basically investigate the basis for the denial. And what you do is that you just contact them. There is a person at the South Carolina Human Affairs Commission that I speak to on a regular basis, and I love referring members to him. And they basically investigate the issue of discrimination based on a disability, and basically takes it over and takes the member through that process. And then what happens after that? Then you have there's a possibility that you could, mediate. I've had people call back and say that, we were able to mediate the issue, that they did find that there was, discrimination. And there are other times that you might get back a response wherein a person is given the right to sue. How much time do we have, Todd? That I just turned off my phone, so now I don't have a clock anymore.
We are at 6:27, so.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let's keep going and I'll try to go through the rest of this. All right, so next. All right, so the next law that I'd like to talk about is the Family and Medical Leave Act. And this is also important. Next slide. Okay, what entities are covered on the FMLA law? Public agencies, public and private elementary and secondary schools, companies with 50 or more employees, and, under the public and private elementary and secondary schools, usually it's not the schools directly, but the districts that are over those schools. And again, it's dependent on, next slide, on your medical evidence. Okay. All right. For what reasons would you qualify for FMLA? The birth of a newborn child of an employee, placement of a child placement with you of an adopted child or a child in foster care. Also, if you are in need to care for an immediate family member, which is the spouse, a child, or a parent who has a serious health condition. And then the more popular one is when an employee is unable to work because of a serious health condition. And just I want to make sure that I point out that to care for an immediate family member with a serious health condition, the employee or the educator must be deemed as a caregiver for that person. And so it goes back again to having some type of doctor's report or documentation to show that you are indeed a person's caregiver. who qualifies. Next slide. If you have worked for the school district for at least 12 months or at least 1,250 hours over the prior past 12 months, then you will qualify. If you just started the job, then you will not qualify. I believe that there is a 9-month category as well. And I think that cafeteria workers and bus drivers would fall into that category. How do you request FMLA? Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one slide. How much leave could I get? FMLA provides for up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave for certain medical situations for either the employee or a member of the employee's immediate family. That is, and it's not guaranteed that you're going to get exactly 12 weeks, but it, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks, and it depends on what your doctor is reporting. Okay, next slide. All right, let's go on to the next one. Okay, what happens when I return back to work or while you are away from work? Okay, during the FMLA leave, the employee must maintain the employee's health coverage under the group health plan. Okay, on the same terms as if the employee had continued to work. Upon return from FMLA leave, most employees must be restored to their original or equivalent positions with equivalent pay, benefits, and other employment terms. From time to time, I will speak with educators who are fearful that while they're on leave that they're going to lose their jobs. No, you should not lose your job. If you are, you have a doctor's note that explains that you needed to be on FMLA, you should be fine when you are, when you're out. So you should basically be taking care of yourself, making sure that you get well, and so that you can return to work and that you'll receive a clearance to go back to work. Now, if you have other issues that had been ongoing prior to going in FMLA, then, it does not exempt you from those issues to be present when you return back from work. But it should not be if you are being terminated or reprimanded or treated discriminatory in any way because you're on FMLA, you definitely need to talk with us. Okay, next slide. All right. Okay, that is pretty much all that I have presented for FMLA. All right, and I also wanted to include in here, Todd, introducing frequently asked questions and answers. This is something that will be included on our website, and it will, it will be a fluid document which will have different issues as they come up. The questions that I've had last year are, different. There are some similarities, but there are some differences in terms of the questions that I asked. I just wanted to put up a couple of them. How does an educator request reasonable accommodations? And we just went through that. An educator should request accommodations by sending a letter, email, or request form to the immediate supervisor and your ADA coordinator or civil rights coordinator. Next slide. Do educators have a right to COVID sick leave during the 2021-22 school year? And the answer is the CARES Act allowed educators to receive sick leave for certain conditions during the 2021 school year. But this right expired December 31st, 2020. And so there is no direct COVID days. However, some districts have allowed employees to receive sick leave days if they, by using their ESSER funds, which is from the federal government. And I have directed members to go directly to their districts to question that. And some people have been able to get those sick leave days. All right, so I think that is it. Todd, I think that what time is it now?
We are at 6:34. And we have on the screen there, just if folks need to contact the SCEA for advocacy, we've got those numbers. We'll leave those up there, and names. We'll leave those up there for just a minute while we close out. But thank you so much, Cherolyn. I think the information that you shared is really valuable to a lot of our members who are struggling and may be wondering what exactly their rights are and how they go about getting accommodations, requesting accommodations. And one of the great benefits of being a member of the SCEA is that you have access to Cherolyn. You have access to our help desk and a legal mind and someone who's can kind of help sort of be by your side as you navigate this whole thing, because you're trying to teach. You may be going through a health issue or a family issue, and that's stressful, and you've got so many things going on, and you just need someone who's going to stand by your side to help you get through some of this tricky stuff, because there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to know. And Cherolyn, you did such a wonderful job of unpacking all of that tonight. But folks who do need additional information, Cherolyn and I talked about it. We decided not to allow questions through the Facebook live stream tonight, because that could get into issues of confidentiality, and we really think it's important for you to direct your questions to the help desk, and then Cherolyn can follow up with you there. So if you do have individual questions, please follow up with her, or feel free to reach out to your UniServe director. And if you're not a member of the SCEA and you'd like access to this kind of support, we would ask you to go to the SCEA.org or join the SCEA.org and be a part of our movement. It's not just a movement, but it's also a team of people that are going to be there to help support you throughout your career. And so this is one of the most important benefits of membership, is this advocacy that we do on your behalf. Cherolyn, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap things up tonight?
No, I just want to say thank you again for having me on. I enjoyed it. I would love to do it again. And I want to also point out that, yes, I do love speaking with our members and love getting new members to communicate with on a daily basis. We also have the UniServe directors who work in the different regions. You have the upstate regional director, you have the Midlands, where we are right now, where I am right now. Well, you are there as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And right. And then we have the Low Country. And so, those advocates are able to work, on more bigger issues that, could evolve from the advocacy issues. So yes, love doing this, and we'll love to do it again, Todd.
Thank you so much. And I just want to preview tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. We're going to have right here on Facebook, we're going to do a live stream with Dr. Jennifer Garrett from SCEA. SCEA just released their supply and demand report. So we hope that you'll tune back in tomorrow night at 7 o'clock as we have that important discussion about the number of teacher vacancies. I think you're going to be really surprised at the number of vacancies and the number of teachers who've left the profession over the past year. So we hope you'll join us for that conversation. Again, thank you so much to Cherolyn Allen, our member advocate, for being with us tonight. Thank you for tuning in. And we hope that everyone out there, if you're not already a member, please consider joining our movement at the SCEA.org. Again, thanks so much. We hope you have a wonderful night. And again, thank you, Cherolyn.
Night.